Our first speaker today is Charlie Locke. Charlie is a 20-year software sales and operations vet who has excelled at big enterprise companies like Adobe, Shutterstock, and Salesforce, has failed miserably with his own startup, and is now focused on scaling growth stage startups from 10 to 50 million. Currently, he's the VP of Sales and Marketing at #Paid. Past coworkers of Charlie describe him as a humble seller and caring leader with a strong leaning towards the data and operations side of the business. In his spare time, he loves learning from thought leaders, books, and most importantly, his wife and 2 kids. Most recently, his learning has been around category creation in an extremely competitive space and how modern B2B marketing models are changing the game. Thank you, Charlie, for being here today. A round of applause for Charlie. Oftentimes when VPs speak, it becomes a popularity contest. Otherwise, they're gonna hear about it the following day.
That better be the loudest. Yeah.
Next up, we've got Sheila. Sheila has spent her entire career in sales, holding every role from sales rep to VP and everything in between. Sheila started her career with Avis and held several positions in Canada and the US during her 10-year tenure there. From there, she discovered technology and software and hasn't turned back. From the initial startup time of Vision Critical's early days to 8 years with the global conglomerate Wolters Kluwer. I had to YouTube how to say that. And a short stint in the BI space at Dundas Data. She recently joined Intellex as VP of Enterprise Sales, where she is responsible for leading and coaching their most senior sales team. Thank you very much, Sheila. And lastly, not least, we've got Mark Ramsey. Mark is currently the CRO at Coconut Software. Mark started his career at IBM in digital equipment and grew into leadership roles with companies like DataMirror, Eloqua, SolarSoft, and CNW. The common element with his companies was that they were all acquired. Most recently, Mark was CRO at EventMobi. Mark has a passion for coaching sales professionals and company founders. Mark also currently works as an EIR at the DMZ, where he mentors company founders in the DMZ Accelerator program. In Mark's spare time, he enjoys endurance cycling and coaching competitive kids' hockey teams. Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, so I normally like to start off the panel by just setting the stage, high-level question with things around your team size, what are you working on day to day, what you care about. So we'll start with Charlie. I just want to get an overall sense of today at #Paid. Can you give everyone an idea of what the team looks like, the stage that you guys are at, and kind of what your focus is on day to day?
Sure. So #Paid, we are in the influencer marketing space. We've over the last year been building a creator media platform, a software platform that essentially connects the world's best creators with some of the largest brands in the world to market on social, which is a huge challenge for a lot of them right now. We now have a team of 55 people, and of that 55, there's about 8 sellers in the sales role. There's 2 SDRs. It's a brand new function for us. And we have 1 person who's now heading up marketing, and we're just hiring on a content marketer as well. For the most part, I came on about 6 months ago to help transition the company from an agency into a software company. And so really for a lot of what my day looks like right now is putting a lot of process in place, putting a lot of systems in place so that we can look at the data around the revenue engine and figure out if we know what we're doing or if the things that we're doing are actually working or not. So bringing a lot of systems and a lot of process around that. And so with that comes a lot of meetings around the messiness of building that out. And essentially just the learnings that all the team has to go through to build a bit of a new sales process and a new data engine behind the whole thing. Other than that, we're focused on product market fit. That's probably where a lot of my effort is. So actually just in deals, trying new positioning, trying new decks, trying new channels for marketing so that we can really figure out what's a repeatable and scalable marketing and sales process.
We're definitely going to dive into that process, but I also love to dive into how you transition from services to SaaS, selling product, and also what that looked like in starting the SDR function at #Paid. So we'll definitely dive into that. Give a chance for now, Mark, to actually, we'll just go to Sheila. we'll just go in order, make life easier for everyone. Give us a little update. I know you're relatively new at Intellex, right? So you've been there still in the 120 days, 3-month mark?
No,
3,
I'm
4 months?
about 5 months.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
so
5 months. That's my first mistake of the night. There'll be many more.
no excuse, right?
5 months. Tell us what you've been focused on the last
So
few months.
Intellex is a provider of environmental health and safety and quality software. Company that's been around about 5 years and one of the premier leaders in the world, basically. Our enterprise sales consists of about 25 individuals, and we're broken up into several verticals. So I handle 2 of the verticals, my colleague handles the other 2. And our team is definitely the most senior and tenured reps in the organization. We also have different divisions. So we have a BDR side that we transition oftentimes, if they make it, into our small and medium-sized market. We also have a mid-market. So definitely a lot of choices there if someone is in sales. My day is really spent, 3 major roles I think that I would have. One is managing my people, and that's everything from team meetings to one-on-ones to coaching and mentoring, being involved with deals. It's also managing customer prospect needs. So that gets into being the executive sponsor, discounting, looking at pricing, looking at deal strategy. And then also managing the business itself. So that's forecasting, it's presenting analytics back to the senior management team, looking at the KPIs, ensuring that quotas are on par with the forecasts that we put in place, whether that be monthly, quarterly, or annually.
Great. We'll jump into all 3 of those. And Mark, please give us the rundown.
Okay, so I'm with Coconut Software. What we do is referred to as enterprise appointment scheduling. So the easiest way of looking at this is we make it easy for a business or a business's customers to schedule appointments when and where they want. Our primary focus this past 12 months has been financial services, selling to banks and credit unions. I don't know how much you know about Coconut, but we actually did our first big fundraise. I think we closed it November of 2017. So I was brought on board right after that. And over the past 12 months, which has been a whirlwind of activity, we've more than doubled headcount. So we're currently around 52. That might change by the hour. As it relates to the sales team, we actually did a full rebuild of the sales team last year, and we currently sit at 11 people, and that's spread across our BDR function, which includes a BDR manager, and I have 3 BDRs that are mapped into respective sales reps. I currently have 5 account executives, and then we have 2 customer success reps, which once we land those customers, their job really is to try and grow them through adoption of the product. My typical week, the great thing about joining a startup or high growth company is there is no typical day or typical week. But what I've tried to do is apply some structure to my week. So my Mondays always look the same in that, number one, we have a Monday morning sales meeting, and the goal there really is to try and set the stage for the week, set goals, try and share on successes from last week or learnings from last week. If we're going to deploy some new process or something like that, I find Mondays are the best time to do it because you actually have a full week to make it stick. And any other learnings as it relates to other parts of the organization, including marketing, because marketing typically launches their programs at the start of the week, and my BDR team typically capitalizes on those programs. I always reserve the middle of my week, so Tuesday through Thursday, for primarily coaching reps. So I get involved in our deals. I think it was mentioned I coach competitive kids hockey, and it's one thing to actually coach people behind the scenes, but it's another thing to actually see them play the game. So I try and get involved in deals. And then the end of the week, we typically reserve for Friday mornings. We have a huddle where we actually try and get the office together. My goal there really is to continue to foster our culture. But more so, I want to make sure we recognize our successes. And when you're moving really, really quick, sometimes you forget to pause, and those Friday morning meetings are really important to me, not only for the sales team to recognize their successes, but others that actually help with that overall sales engine. So.
Thank you. Okay. So you hit on some things there, Mark, that I want to start diving into. And we're going to go in order of your week. So we'll start with the Monday morning meeting. Is that a time where you're speaking with reps about deals? Are you actually getting into the pipeline review, or are you focusing more on the health of the business, new processes, any changes that might have happened the previous week, and kind of solidifying that?
Yeah, so I actually try and keep that Monday morning meeting really brief, because the goal is to try and create some energy, get people on the phones. And so it's number one, goal setting. And we don't necessarily get into the specifics of the pipeline, because the rest of that Monday, which I forgot to mention, is I actually do my individual pipeline sessions with each of the reps. And partly the reason I like to do that is I like to actually help them set goals for the week, because if we don't have a goal, we don't necessarily know whether or not we're being successful. So we actually tactically look at individual deals that we're going to try and move forward during that week. I figure out the role that I can play in moving those deals forward. And then beyond that, it is a meeting so I can roll out some new process, because we're constantly tweaking the dial, so to speak.
And from the other speakers, if you have a different process or similar process, I'm curious to hear about this. You do pipeline meetings in one-on-ones. You don't do a team-wide pipeline meeting. Charlie, Sheila, do you guys incorporate the entire team in pipeline reviews, or do you do them all also individually?
Generally with my one-on-ones, that happens once a week, and it is a pipeline review. Depending on, we're enterprise sales, so there might only be a handful of deals at any given time that we're talking about. We're not talking about a lot of them. So it's a quick pipeline review. We review goals. We talk about strategy, what else we can do with those particular accounts. My team meeting, we actually have guest speakers that come in a lot. So whether that be services, it could be marketing, it could be anyone else in the organization. If it warrants going through the pipeline, depending if we're talking about services and how that relates to it, yeah, we'll go through the pipeline. Otherwise, it's really just team-oriented.
Charlie, I used to work with some ex-Salesforce people, and it used to be team pipeline reviews. So I'm curious to hear if you're individual or your team on team pipeline.
We are team. We just started actually rolling these out starting next week. So it's a bit of a new function now that we have Salesforce up and running and working. My whole goal with the data and the systems is to basically have that prescribe as much as possible where there's things that we need to look into from a deal level. So I'd say to my reps, I'd try not to dig into deals on one-on-ones. It's more career growth, challenges that they're currently having in their process, or challenges that they're sussing out themselves. And then essentially we really have a strong perspective on just keeping your data up to date in Salesforce on your deals, so that I can poke in here and there, and I can just come to you in the aisle and check in on a deal, or chatter you in Salesforce if I need to, because I find what happens in one-on-ones is that I'm teaching the same thing over and over, or we're identifying the same problems in a lot of the deals, and so it's a lot more efficient as a coach for me to essentially coach in front of all the reps. So we can pick apart one deal in front of everyone, and 5 other people might be like, oh, yeah, I'm having the same problem with my deal. I could probably work on that too. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how we do it. Yeah. Team meetings are very similar. A lot of process changes. A lot of sort of where we're at right now from a numbers perspective, where we're seeing challenges based on what the reports are telling us. Process changes, highlighting successes and failures. Yep.
Have either of you at any point done pipeline reviews on a team-wide level, or have you switched at one point, or have they always been on an individual level?
So with Coconut, I've always tried to do them individually. Partly, number one, the team's pretty small. We actually, when I arrived, we were transitioning from a business that sold to pretty much anybody with a pulse, I'd like to say, right? Small business all the way through enterprise. To now we're shifting more towards an enterprise sales model. So the volume of deals isn't necessarily as high. Charlie did hit on an important point though, which is breaking down a deal so you can use it as a teaching tool. So often what I'll find is in the middle of a pipeline review, as we're talking about a specific deal and we're talking about some of the complexities, maybe about calculating the pain that client is experiencing, I'll often actually suddenly just invite others into that pipeline review because I don't like repeating myself. And so we can actually then break that deal down and use the collective brain power of the team to try and figure this out. And so as much as I have those individual pipeline reviews, I think my team would agree with me. I have a lot of ad hoc team meetings too, where I'll just pull people in because I'll see there's an opportunity for coaching.
Great.
Yeah, I think the key with that is you need to get everyone really comfortable with their baby getting poked at in a lot of ways. And so that in itself is a just part of the culture that you need to create, which is it's okay that we're prodding into deals and that it's, being cynical about deals is the only way for you to really get deals done. Because optimism, it's not being negative, it's not being not optimistic, it's just being cynical about whether it's going to get done. And so creating that culture where people are okay talking about their deals in front of other people. And you doing that, I like to do it in the aisle even, and sometimes when there's something interesting coming out, you start to talk louder and you can hear people, picking, their ears picking up. So makes sense.
I think with my individual pipeline meetings, so that's strictly just per individual, but in the team meetings, we really do break out and what are learnings that you've done. If someone's struggling with a strategy, if someone really doesn't know if they should do X or Y, we bring the whole team in together and we discuss it as a group. It really promotes the team.
Yeah, one thing that I recently read was assigning each person a new learning to bring up at every team meeting. And so that they're accountable for something that you necessarily taught them in a one-on-one, they have to repeat it to the team. And there's no better way to learn something than try to teach it to other people. In terms of the middle part of the week, Mark, when we're actually working inside of deals and coaching, a two-parter. How involved are you in terms of actually being involved within that deal versus just standing on, being a bystander and just listening in, providing feedback? And then number two, putting it on the rep's perspective, what can they do to make sure that what can they best do to ensure that they're leveraging you the best so that they're not waiting for you to come in, but they have specific asks from you?
Yeah. So I try and play both roles. So I think the expression, I use a couple of expressions when I describe it. It's either I'm throwing you in the deep end, but I'm going to come in and save you if you need saving. But depending on where the deal is and how long the rep's been tenured, because I have a mix of tenure on my team, I may play a far more active role in the call. Like certainly as we get closer to negotiation, I actually play a very active role in those calls. But I actually, and going to your earlier point before we transition to this, I subscribe to a model of encouraging my reps to fail. And that doesn't mean miss their number, by the way, so don't take that away from this. But what I mean by that is I want them to constantly take risks and try new things. And so we actually talk about this as a team. In fact, those Friday morning meetings, I borrowed it from a company that I previously worked for. We talk about fail, learn, innovate, right? And it's really important to talk about those risks that they took or where they applied something new from a learning from the week, because I didn't talk about this, but we do these weekly sales trainings. And the goal is to constantly evolve. That's the only way we're going to grow the business, because if we're repeating yesterday's activities, we're going to repeat yesterday's results, which my investors won't be happy with. So I actually, just going back to your question, more often than not, if it's early in the sales cycle, so let's say it's a qualification call, I actually sit back, and every room has a whiteboard, so I might actually write some questions up and try and steer the conversation so they don't feel alone. But I will not speak up unless I feel that they're potentially drowning. Mm-hmm. Later in those sales cycles, almost every call, I speak up. Sometimes my reps will say too much, but I speak up because I want to make sure we're stewarding the deal in a certain direction on a certain timeline.
How about for the rest of you? We have the luxury of having quite a senior team. They've have long tenure with the organization. And we do things a little bit differently. We are very much a team-oriented, collaborative organization. So there's a couple of things that we do, one being an account strategy. So when the AEs or the account executives have a handful of accounts, and we really go through it and look at what accounts are going to target in this particular year, and build a strategy around that account, not the deal itself, but the account and how we're going to penetrate that. And that's not just me and the rep. That can be senior executive team. It can be someone from finance. It could really look at something, bringing in our services team or some of the technical people. And then we take it a step further and really look at a strategy deal. So we do deal strategies on the ones that we know, those opportunities that we're really going to pay attention to this year or trickle down. And then we really look at, there could be an entire meeting that is just a pricing meeting. And so we're going to bring all the folks in that are going to be related to pricing. There could be something about building contacts, or there are people in the organization that have first or level connections with that person. Same thing from legal. Do we know what procurement's going to be like? How difficult is it going to be? And who do we need to get involved at the onset? And then we also do QBRs, so quarterly business reviews, that we even take that a step further. How has the rep done in the previous quarter? What are we looking to close in this quarter? And so we look at the strategy in 3 different ways constantly.
Can you give us a size of the amount of accounts that an individual rep might have? Because I imagine it's probably less than both yours. And if you can also include the average sales price of a deal.
Absolutely.
That
so the reps' maximum accounts from the enterprise side would be about 50 accounts. They're probably working 20 to 25 at any given time. The average deal size can really range. Some of our largest are $400,000 or $500,000. Some of the smaller ones are about $50,000, and kind of everywhere in between. But the sweet spot's probably about 100 to 200K.
I'm sure most people would love an ASP of 50K. And Charlie, I know you're relatively similar size to Coconut. So how involved are you with some of the deals, and what's your perspective when it comes to coaching and being involved in the deals? What does that look like?
Yeah, I'm because we're going through a sort of a shift in the organization and how we attack the market and how we position ourselves. When I got there, I actually really, the current COO was managing the sales team, and we kept it that way for a couple months so that I could just run deals myself. And knowing that we needed to build a new sales process, we needed to try new messaging, and still to a degree, I will take some deals sometimes, and usually it's with someone who's new, and I'll just try to run the deal, and it's selfishly so that I can hear how my words are actually being received on the other side, how the decks are, being received, and the things that they really starting to glom to, and the things that they really don't really care about. So that's I'm very hands-on right now, and that was learnings from past startups at like FlashStock, where I was just came in and did all the operational stuff and didn't really get my hands in the deals. And I'd recommend if you're in that early stage looking to just hire a few salespeople, or you've just hired a few salespeople, like stay in the deal and run some deals. Just keep running deals yourself, because until you've really honed in on the product market fit, you're not going to be able to figure it out through it's essentially secondhand information. But based on the tenure of a sales rep and specifically the area of coaching that they need is where I'll be more hands-on or not. So if someone's struggling with discovery, then I'll certainly be on more of their discovery calls, and I'll use the mute button a lot. Like mute button's a huge part of sales coaching. So whether it's the whiteboard, right, where you're giving people questions, or if you're just muting because the question is really going nowhere, and you're like, okay, we got to steer this in another direction, and we got to, this is really going nowhere, and let's figure this out, and let's ask these questions, let's try to dig into this pain, and maybe see if there's something down that path. But a lot of muting and talking to each other, or if someone's struggling in, obviously the presentation phase or negotiation, as sales leaders, we need to just drag deals across the line sometimes, and so we'll obviously get involved with negotiation. Most buyers want that role to come in at anyways at that phase of the deal, because they were like, okay, let me talk to your VP and we'll do a deal. It's really just based on the tenure, where that rep's struggling, and that's where I'll decide how much energy I have in the deal, or whether I'm hands-on or not. Yeah.
What are some key metrics that today you're looking at? Come in on Monday morning, you come in any morning, go to open Salesforce, go to the dashboard, and you click refresh. What's loading up on that dashboard? What are you looking at? What are the first things you're pointing your rep's eyes to morning? And has that shifted since you've joined, since you've hired more people, and what's that shifted from?
Yeah, well, a lot of the reps are here, and so they know it's pipeline, because essentially, what I learned at Salesforce is that everything's an input into a deal. And so you can track bookings all you want, but it's not going to really help you change your behavior or really figure out where you should be focusing your time. So the largest input that I'm looking at for the most part is just pipeline created. Pipeline created by channel, by rep, by expansion, new business. And I don't necessarily want to prescribe the activities that reps use to get to that number. It can be emails, it can be calls. A lot of organizations will really heavily focus on activities. I'm personally believing that these channels are starting to deteriorate. So I want them to have the freedom to try new channels like LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever it might be, but that end goal is pipeline. I don't really care how you get there. But that is the ultimate dictator of your success, because once you figure out how to repeatedly build pipeline, then you just need to measure close rates and sales cycle lengths, and you can essentially do all the rest of the math. The key other metrics would be kind of like culture metrics, I guess I call them. I'm not as much in the row as I'd like to be, so I'll be actively looking at the team and how they're working with other teams cross-functionally. When they're in meeting rooms, they're all glass. I can see, are they expressive with other team? Are they collaborating? Are they sitting at their desk and they just kind of, going through the motions? That's all just going to give me sort of an energy around the happiness that people have, I think, and because inherently, at the end of the day, I don't think, in sales, it's a tough job. We're in the business of failing 80% of the time, so maybe 70%, hopefully.
Maybe your reps.
Yeah. They're all here. Yeah.
This is what we're hoping
We'll get
for.
You. Yeah. So it's a grind, and and I think for a lot of it, I think of it like painting in a way. It's just I painted one summer, and I was just like, well, I love painting, and I was like 17 years old, and then I got to the job site and I realized that like 90% of the time you're chipping and sanding, you're actually not painting. And I was just like, shit, this is a really shitty job. Like I liked painting, I didn't like sanding all the time. And so celebrating those small wins and keeping the energy up and just having a really like your antenna up onto the energy of the team and how people are feeling, how they're collaborating, how much they're teaching each other is super important. Those are sort of the softer metrics that I look at, because those are things that you can't use a dashboard to motivate through. Like if you think you can motivate salespeople by fear, by pointing to a dashboard, you're wrong, because we've all chose this role because we don't like fear as a motivator. We like the reward. We like the carrot. So fear as a motivator is just laziness as like a sales leader. And so you need to focus on the happiness and try to just give them the goals to get to and let them find their way to get there.
One follow-up question, and then I'll hand it off. I know Mark's ready. How do you, have you reversed engineer pipeline creation? So, your quota for this year or this quarter, this month is X. In order to reach that quota, you need to create this much pipeline. Are you reverse engineering it for every rep and they're accountable for that? How involved are they in that process of pipeline creation?
So because we don't have a marketing team, really, they're heavily involved right now. So a lot of our, we just changed a lot of the revenue function to include all of our CS team who is here today. So now, and my big bet for Q1, Q2 is expansion pipeline, which we haven't really focused on before. So we've basically built out the model for the year based on, high, medium, low targets that we want to hit, but then reverse engineer it from pipeline goals that we need to hit. based on what we know of our sales cycle length now and our typical close rate. We obviously need to then measure the close rate and the sales cycle length and the pipeline created to figure out if we're on track or not, or if we need to change things or hire more salespeople or what. Yeah.
And you've recently started an SDR function.
Yep.
And so in theory, AEs are going to be less relied upon for creating pipe. It's going to be more of the SDRs.
It's a theory. It's an interesting theory.
The idea is AEs are spending more of their time working deals rather than prospecting.
Ideally, I just think you should always have everything on. The second you start to hand over responsibilities to other members, just because they're only doing one function, things start to fall down. So I don't really prescribe to that. Like ideally, we have SDRs working mostly inbound. But that marketing function is not working as well as I'd like to right now, so that's a big focus. So a lot of the outbound will still be coming from the account executives themselves.
Curious to get your input on all that, but also most specifically like the numbers that you're tracking, and then how that translates to what are people doing on a day-to-day basis. Mark?
Yeah, I was thinking first I want that happiness dashboard object from Salesforce so I can measure it. But gauging your team here, they seem pretty happy. So we run our business, number one, based on 3 KPIs. And so I'm always paying attention to those 3 KPIs. Guess what? 2 of them are tied to revenue. And so I'm actually...
What are those KPIs?
What are those KPIs? So total revenue booked. Then I look at ARR. And then actually last year we had a KPI, which was retention, which we had 100% retention last year. So we're actually shifting that this year to net revenue retention. And so the customer success team is now focused on not only retaining revenue, but trying to grow those accounts. And so we've set a goal well above 100%. Good luck, Reese. So as it relates to those metrics, though, I really focus on them as it's more role specific, right? So the BDR team, as much as I'll say I look at activity and dials and things like that, that's not really the important metric for me. The important metric is op creation. And then the second most important metric for me is really the conversion rate from conversation to opportunity. And it's funny, we know all this stuff, but often we'll get into this vacuum where we start operating and focusing on other metrics and we overlook these things. I think it was the middle of last year that all of a sudden I started focusing on that conversion metric. And I'll tell you why it was important to me is if I give everybody the same list and everybody's calling on the same persona, if I see my BDRs having different conversion ratios from conversation to opportunity, number one, it might mean there's a coaching opportunity because potentially they're not conveying our value prop in the same manner. And or if I have somebody that's significantly higher, it's probably a learning opportunity for me because maybe they're doing something that I wasn't aware of and we potentially want to share that with the team. So that metric for me is probably the most important beyond ops created for the BDRs. With the sales team, I'm primarily focused on, again, op creation, so additions to their pipeline, and they all have an understanding of what their goals are. So to your earlier question, do you work with the team and work backwards so they understand what they need? We actually just finished the exercise where they had to build their own territory plans, and we do what I call the revenue waterfall and work backwards from your quota, understand how many opportunities you need in your pipeline, and more specifically, how many you need to add each and every day or each and every week. And then they even work backwards from there to figure out how many calls or activities they need to do to get there. I'm big in the math, by the way, but I don't live in dashboards. So with them, I am primarily focused on op creation beyond the obvious, which is how much have you closed for me today? But I'm always looking at a lot of other metrics because I built my plan based on metrics. So I'm looking at the average deal size. I'm looking at the cadence or how quickly deals are moving forward. I'm looking at the average age of our closed ones versus closed loss versus my pipeline. Because if my pipeline's older than the average age of a closed one, I probably have a lot of fiction in there. I'm looking at potentially how often we're incorporating more than one product into a sale, because that's going to forecast future growth with those accounts. So there's a lot of other metrics that I use, but my primary metric for them is just either close or what I'll call withdrawals from that bank account, called the pipeline, or deposits you're making into that bank account. And then finally, with customer success, who retain and grow clients, my focus there is primarily number of accounts they haven't touched in 60 days, because if we're not talking to our customers, somebody else is. And then ops created by them for cross-sell and upsell. There's a lot of other data points, but those are really the two primary metrics I focus on with them.
I assume they're compensated on any expansion or upsell revenue that they bring in. So
their comp plan is comprised of retention first and foremost, but this year they haven't seen their comp plan yet. It's now, they're seeing it tomorrow. So
let's talk about it now.
Surprise, guys. Do you want to stand up?
New experiment at SalesTO.
It is actually shifting more towards growth for next year, just because we had the good fortune of 100% retention last year. My first time ever with a SaaS business, by the way.
And you brought up territory. So is that something that you're rolling out with the team right now?
So I actually did that going into the year and or leaving last year. So they knew. So I've moved to a geo model, and then my team. I have 2 senior account executives, which will flow into other territories for some named accounts, and then every account executive owns a defined territory. So what I did was I built the overall plan, and did all the research and got all the data, but then I put a template together and I had them go through the exercise of building their own territory plan. The reason why I do that is I feel it fosters ownership, not only ownership of the plan, because I share with the reps that this is their franchise and they should run their franchise as they see fit. Me as the overall brand owner, I can ultimately step in when I think the franchise isn't being run properly. And that plan really becomes the basis of that. So they'll build the plan. We run through the plans because they have to present them in front of each other. And we use that as a coaching opportunity to figure out what they potentially missed. And at the same time, we're potentially validating math and things like that to make sure the goals they've set for themselves are achievable. But that plan is critical for me.
I think territories are very interesting because we've had large companies come in and it often becomes a topic of conversation because some companies come in and say territories didn't work for us, either the geo model or vertical. And at Intellex, you mentioned that you are broken down by industry or vertical.
We're broken down by vertical, okay. But we're also a named account structure. Okay. So before my time, they were a geo organization, and it's worked a little bit better just in terms of the vertical. So there's manufacturing and resources, food and beverage, and infrastructure and services, which is basically everything else, government, healthcare, construction. And so it's worked really well in that we've split up the team. My particular team is about 6-7 people. We also have a really different kind of organization with our enterprise sales in that the senior people are assigned to myself, a VP of enterprise sales, and my colleague. Anyone who has been with the organization 12 months or less, actually 18 months or less, they're reporting to a different individual, and he's a director of enterprise sales who was originally a sales rep, did extremely well. And so what we have really determined is that to bring those individuals into the organization and make them Intellexians, and to learn about the different verticals, to learn about the product, we have them learning from that past sales rep.
And in terms of the territory model, you said it for Intellex, it was better to switch from the geo model to verticals. Why is that the case?
More the account name structure. So the verticals have always been there.
Okay.
And because there's not a lot of our deals typically take 18 months to 2 to 3 years to close. So I'm not looking at the velocity of an opportunity moving. Yes, we're looking at pipeline and building that. We're not looking on the day-to-day KPIs in terms of that activity. I think the AEs, the account executives, are probably their own worst enemy. They know that they are constantly in contact with their different contacts, with building more decision makers, building more people within their decision-making tree and that organizational structure. So it just works based on the size of the deals and how long they take.
Great. I want to shift a bit to more of hiring, career growth, because what I like about all three of your experiences is that you've had experiences at early stage companies, helping building and growing and scaling the teams, and also larger companies who've done millions and millions of dollars in revenue and helping to continuously run the team and break it out into further segments. And I know, Charlie, we've spoken about this in the past, that you're a huge proponent of, if you're relatively new in your career, join a larger, more established company like a Salesforce, where they have best practices in place, they have the training and the support in place. So can you talk a bit about your thought process behind that, if you'd still recommend that? I don't know, maybe it's changed now that you've had a few stints at earlier stage startups, but a bit about for people entering their sales career or looking for more support in sales training in their career. Because it seems like, sorry, last point, it seems like everyone here is focused very heavily on sales training. Doesn't matter if you have 5 people on your team, 25 people on your team, if you're doing $2 million revenue or $50 million revenue. So is that still the case?
Yeah, absolutely. I would, except for the people that are working at #paid early in their sales career. But yeah, I'm a big believer in specialization of your craft, and it's sometimes difficult to do that at a startup. I mean, I'm managing enterprise sellers, mid-market sellers, SDRs, marketing. So inherently, you're just not going to get the same level of coaching from me as you're going to get from a manager of a team that's just focused on one specific segment and one specific sales cycle. And so I do believe early in your career, it's important to go somewhere where there's healthy competition as well in that team, so that you can figure out how to win, because I think a lot of us are competitive as sellers as well. And going through that pain of, being a top performer somewhere else and then coming to, a large organization where all of a sudden you're a B or C player and learning about that failure and having to grow and get better and learn new muscles. I think the key muscle, though, I think that is sometimes missed if you're not at a larger, more specialized function, is just understanding how the data works and how you can leverage that data for you to become a better seller. And so sometimes that is overlooked in startups because they don't have the functional leadership that understands how the sales and revenue systems work properly. So I still truly believe in that. For me now, I just try to figure out ways to scale training if I can. So I'll do, I have an SDR weekly sync, which is basically, let's go through some of your top problems, and I'll run basically 20 minutes where we go through some of the key problems that they're going through, and then I'll do training ad hoc because I can't structure out, training for SDR specifically for them right now. But then we'll record that, put it into Level Jump, which we have on Salesforce for onboarding, and keep that in there for coaching purposes. So I think that's all things you can start to do just to scale the education piece as people grow. I think most importantly, though, it's getting just a culture of exposing your weakness, I think is really important. I talk about that a lot. In my bio, I talked about how I failed. I talk about failing all the time because until you have a sales culture where people are comfortable failing, and they're just not going to learn because you're going to have a sales team that's got a lot of pride and bravado and competitiveness, and they'll tend to hide the things that they're not good at for fear of being perceived wrong by their peers or their leaders. And so it's on us leaders to just really impart that weakness and that humility, so that people start to have the same type of culture for themselves, and they start to focus on things that they can learn. They start to talk to each other and say, hey, that call didn't go very well. Maybe I screwed something up. Can you take a look at these notes and see where I could have done something better, rather than just throwing down the phone and saying, oh, another customer lied to me, and those are the exact same conversation, but two very different follow-up approaches based on the kind of culture you create.
Yep. Having the right mentality and attitude.
Our training is pretty detailed, to tell you the truth. So I mentioned the department where we have the younger reps reporting to someone who is very much a senior rep, and they can learn an awful lot of the processes through that individual. But our onboarding is quite detailed as well. So that's a week of really getting to know the organization, getting to know the industry, getting to know the competitors. And then we have individuals that shadow some of the other reps. They really will work with others before we get them on the phone and talking to other clients as well. We also have sales enablement, which is a phenomenal department that really takes everything from either professional training, so we've brought in John Barrows about a year ago, but also tips and tricks, putting people towards webinars that are going to help them with their product training, having them direct them to specific articles. So then I can use those in my own training with the team as well. We also do product training. So for the newer people, we do that bi-weekly. So we have all of our experts in the different product lines, and they will train as well. And weekly, we do something called a Sales Academy. So we do that for the whole sales organization. They kind of have the choice whether to go or not, depending on the topic. But that can be anything from additional product training. It can be new processes that are put in place. Not generally new policies. We have new people that have come on board. We've recently opened up an office in Reading, UK. So we had our general manager come in and really talk about what he's gone through in the last 90 days. So it really gives you a good feel for the organization, the product, and it opens up the door for training for the individuals as well. And then even in team meetings, we bring in guest speakers so that they can really focus on different areas of the department. We're an organization that's about 450 people, so we do have some luxuries that maybe startups don't.
I remember, and I'm sure Mark and Charlie can attest to this, but joining Vidyard, okay, you have 24 hours for ramp, you have a demo tomorrow, and you have to learn how to use the product tonight. Go. You just don't have the luxury at the earlier stage. Mark, what about your teams?
Well, maybe going back to the earlier question you asked Charlie about start with a big company or small company, I think it can go either way. And why it can go either way, the value of joining a big company, and I started with a big company. In fact, I was the last of their field sales development program graduates, so I got exposed to 4 sales methodologies in the first 6 months. And for me, the value of the big company, if they're making an investment in training their sales teams, because not everybody does, is you'll actually learn proper sales methodology, right? Which I think is a building block we all need. I'm going to do a little commercial. So as it relates to sales, I treat sales like it's my trade, right? So my father was a lithographer. I've chosen this as my trade. I've never mastered my trade. I want to constantly learn each and every day, which means learn new sales methodologies, learn new ways of doing things. And so when I hire people, that's what I'm trying to do with them, is get them to adopt this as their trade and be hungry to learn. So it's my job, and what we do at Coconut is to give them the tools so they can learn. So I actually teach sales methodology. I should probably engage Chris from Sandler. He can probably do a better job than me, but not only are we teaching sales methodology, but we're teaching different ways of selling. I have the good fortune that I have a really smart team that I'm surrounded with, and like one of my reps, Taylor here, she teaches a weekly social selling course, because social selling is not sending a LinkedIn connection request. And so she runs people through this program that spans months. And what we try and do is constantly build on your skills through repetition. And we've placed a heavy emphasis on training, not only from myself and from people on the team, but we even somewhat subscribe to it through this concept of, we call it a book club. And so everybody on my team, if they're going to take from my team, by take, I mean they're going to learn, my expectation is you're going to give back. And so everybody on my team gets assigned a book, and what they're supposed to do is present their learnings from a book. And it doesn't matter if it's more of a modern concept of selling, or if it's something that's a little more dated. Like we actually went through spin selling today, which I remember going through back in the day. And so the great thing though is we're constantly bringing new learnings to bear, and we're constantly evolving ourselves as salespeople, right? And certainly that's my goal here. So circling back to that question though, I think there's merits in joining small organizations though too as your first sales job. And the reason for that is, provided you're given a good mentor so you can learn, you're actually afforded an opportunity to do a lot more than just that role. And so when you're in a big company and you're hired as a BDR, guess what you're doing every day? You're a BDR. If you're at a small company and you're hired as a BDR, guess what you're doing every day? Who knows? Because I might ask you to do something with the marketing team, or you might actually start shadowing the sales reps on calls so you can start learning how and why your opportunities are not moving forward or why they are moving forward. Maybe you're actually tasked with a persona exercise where you have to go out and try and build out a persona that we want to start targeting. And that's, for me, the great value in working with a small company is just that diversity and the ability to learn as you go. But the caveat that I put on that is you better make sure that whoever you're working with is going to act as a mentor and they're going to coach you.
One very important follow-up question. I didn't catch the trade that your father was in, the profession.
Lithographer, which means he's a printer.
Okay, I had no idea. Did anyone else know what that was? Okay, good. At least.
So there was one learning from tonight. That's great.
I have a quick question. We're running out of time. I want to leave some time for the audience to ask some questions. Coming into your roles, each of you develop a cast of people to help support you day to day, whether that's someone in sales ops, sales manager, sales enablement, other leaders on your team, people in marketing, whomever it is. I'm curious to kind of go through, as you've come into your organization, who you've leaned on for what resources, how they've supported you, and you know, what are some of the strengths you look for other people to make sure that what you need done gets executed. Charlie, I'll kick it off to you because I know you've done a lot of hiring lately.
Yeah. So just because of where we were as an organization, where we were growing really, really well, but didn't really know why, a lot of systems had to be put in place. So I very quickly aligned with an extremely smart person in our company named Daphne, and we moved her from a sort of data analyst finance role into sales ops. And so she's been sort of hand in hand with me building out the systems. Essentially, you know, we've got a really unique time that I've never been in an organization before. We've got a fresh sales force that's not all screwed up because someone...
Give it 30 days.
Yeah, we're getting there pretty fast. Yeah, but you know, it's really important to put those data structures in place so that you can have the governance around the data, so that you actually figure out what you're doing is working or not. And so for me, that was like a key sort of first role, and then bringing in other sellers from previous organizations that I've worked with before that I can trust, that I know that they know my sales process, so that I can essentially, and so that was Michael Galliano, who I brought over early on as well, whom I can say, hey, let's just try this approach, and I don't have to worry about whether it's the approach or the person, because I already know the person can deliver. And so that was like removing that variable for me was extremely important, so that I can essentially test really quickly on if it's the approach or if it's the sales process or whatever it is. And then lastly, bringing on like a first SDR in this startup phase is extremely difficult. And so, you know, that first SDR needs to be someone who's just incredibly smart and autonomous and has a very optimistic attitude, because they're going to not get the coaching. And that's Shannon, who's here as well. And she doesn't come from a sales background at all, but she's just been figuring this thing out with me. And so, you know, finding those key roles to build out these future teams has been a key piece for me. And for most part, it's do I just trust the person, whether it's a sales, or I trust the person so I can remove the variable of whether it's the person or the process or the equation.
I leaned on everyone. I didn't come from the industry at all. So my boss in particular is probably one of the industry's experts. So I learned a lot about the industry from him. But we have a structured organization in that marketing helps us generate all the leads that eventually then go to a BDR. So I'm working closely with marketing to ensure that the campaigns that they're generating are either creating awareness or they're actually getting to something that actually goes to the AE. Then work with the BDR team and their managers to make sure that the messaging that we're putting across is going to help us qualify something to the right degree that it's actually going to be something quality going to the account executive. Sales enablement helps us with all the training. And so for me, it's leaning on what they've done in the past, what worked, what didn't work to make sure I wasn't duplicating any efforts. Sales ops, setting up all the dashboards and reports and the metrics that we all look at and keep everybody accountable for. You know, it's just, I couldn't say that one role is any more important than another. It goes from legal with the contracts and all the sales components and even pre-sales, because they're very involved with the demos and the presentation. So I'm learning with my reps at the same time with that.
One proxies for how much time you're spending with those people. So if you had to say you spend the most time with X, would it be marketing, sales ops?
Marketing.
Marketing?
Yeah, marketing now. We're really focused on lead generation right now. That's probably one of our key metrics. And it's getting the right leads coming through. Make sure we're targeting the right contacts and the right titles. And, you know, we fail too, right? So not everything is perfect. And, you know, you want to make sure that the leads going to your reps are the right ones from the beginning. You don't want them to lose faith. You don't want them to lose faith with marketing or with the BDR process. And it's trying to make sure that we get it right the first time.
Thanks. Mark?
So respecting that I had a non-solicitation clause, I didn't recruit anybody that worked for me before, but I had the good fortune of having people follow me to my current employer. And so I actually, I leaned on them significantly when I first arrived. Quite frankly, the team that I've hired is much smarter than me. And to Charlie's point about looking for problem solvers, with an early stage company, you don't have the choice but to hire problem solvers, because that's how you're going to move the bar. Because if people are looking for checklists to get everything done, you're not going to move the bar very quickly. So I lean on everybody, but if I looked at last year, I probably leaned on those two individuals that joined me from a past company, because the one individual helped me reshape our entire sales model and go-to-market strategy. And then the other person, quite frankly, helped me reshape how we were going to retain and grow those clients. Looking at this year, though, and I know my team hearing Sheila talking about all these leads, they might be leaving me, but
they're not all perfect.
Yeah, my focus this year is shifting more to business development and marketing, because I have marketing under my purview as well. And so our real goal to get this engine really going, this revenue engine going, is I need to get marketing up and running and producing a sustainable, consistent flow of leads. Of course, high quality. And at the same time, what we're trying to do is shift our BDR function from one which is, I'd say 90% outbounds, where we have a split between inbound and outbound, because outbound is a tough slog for growing your business. And so it worked for us last year, but if you want to continue to try and triple revenue, eventually you're going to run out of fuel. So I'd say more and more my focus this year, given that my team is starting to mature on the sales side, it's really shifting to building that marketing function up so we can produce leads.
And I think that's interesting, because that's hiring SDRs is not a scalable approach. Yeah. And I'll eventually catch up with you. Great. I want to open it up to questions from the audience. I think we have some folks with mics. Does anyone have a mic already? Okay, we've got a question in front here.
She can't ask a question.
All right, let's take them
first. Okay. My question is for Sheila. So you mentioned that you have junior reps working with senior reps. And as a BDR, I know that You definitely look up to the enterprise as the be-all, end-all of your sales career. In your experience, if you're speaking to a BDR within Intellex, what would you say are two of the key qualities they need to be successful as an enterprise representative, and one that might be a barrier for their success?
Love what you're doing. It's a hard slog for a BDR, and it becomes very repetitive. In our organization, BDRs are often that first step. And we have three big segments. One is small and medium size, then mid-market, and then enterprise. And so for them, it's like, keep doing what you're doing, do it right, come to the table with new ideas. We're not all perfect. I certainly don't know everything. Our BDR manager doesn't know everything. So we really want people to present new ideas and be really innovative in the organization. And then what was the second part of your question?
One thing that would be a barrier to, as an enterprise rep, like
to an enterprise rep, not loving what you're doing. It's very hard. It's a long sales cycle. We're talking about big deals that you could be working on for 2 years, and then you lose your budget and you might not get it back for another year. So it's really keeping the pipeline going and not relying on just hunting all the whales, because you have some existing accounts. Make sure you're trying to at least upsell during that time as well.
Thanks. And Mark mentioned a good point earlier, which was maybe focus on learning rather than just making your metrics simply about, converting or creating pipe. But how am I continuously learning and tracking that over quarters or months or things like that? Another question over there. Noah.
Hi guys, I'm Noah Kaufman. I'm director of sales of a up-and-coming startup in the cannabis space called Strainprint. I will be hiring. Speaking of which, looking for some advice from you guys surrounding the type of person that you would be looking to hire in an outbound sales role, inside sales, transactional type deal. I'm going at this for the first time in my career and absolutely looking for some advice from some senior folks on attributes of that SDR role for a startup.
You want to take it or should I take it?
Hey man, how are you? I used to manage Noah a long time ago. Good to see you, man. Really happy for you. Glad it's going well for you. It's going to depend on your sales cycle, and essentially where your funnel's coming from. So I think it sounds like it's like an inside sales role. You want them actually closing deals. Right.
One gram at a time.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key thing that, we always look for is curiosity, right? Someone that just likes to ask questions why things work the way they do or why they don't work the way they do. Those people tend to sell more because they just dig in a bit deeper than the other person who's going through the list of discovery questions. And so they have a genuine curiosity about what's going on in that person's business or what's going on in that sales cycle. I mean, if it's a highly transactional role, I'm going to be looking for someone that's got some analytical skills for sure, that likes the data, likes looking at themselves and coaching themselves through the data, and will think about ways to measure themselves better by creating another Salesforce field or, putting some other process in place so that they can do that self-reflection where you don't have to pick it apart as a sales leader and be on every call with them. So those would be, and then of course, hard work. I really dig into people's childhood to figure out just, did you have to work when you were growing up? Are you a lot of people we work with now, when you say, let's dig a hole, they sit and start to figure out how sharp the shovel should be, and they'll sit there for a long time, where other people will just go dig the fucking hole. And sometimes you got to dig the hole. And that comes a lot from how they were raised. So, you want certainly someone that can go through, that has that sort of, that chip on their shoulder, right?
I think I'd add to that. For that role, I look for people, in addition to those traits, I look for people that are goal-oriented, right? So they're motivated for more. A simple question I ask in most interviews is, tell me about a goal that you set for yourself that you recently accomplished, or vice versa. Tell me about a goal that you set for yourself that you hope to accomplish over the next 12 months. If they pause and they're thinking about it, they're probably not a goal-oriented individual. Even the best of us can't fake it. And beyond that, I look for fearless people and or people that are not going to give up. I don't know if I should give up our secret sauce, but Taylor from our team, by the way, loves asking this question. Now everybody's going to start asking it, but hey, it turns out I'm blind, and describe the color blue to me. And it's amazing when you ask a question like that, how many people just give up. And the question I'd ask you in return is that the person you want on your team, knowing the challenges you're going to face over the next 12 months, that they're going to face a challenge where they're dealing with a new prospect and they don't know how to sell, and so they're just going to give up. So that's one of many questions. So we have lots of questions where we throw curveballs at people to make sure that they're problem solvers, but at the same time, they're going to be fearless, because everybody can come up with excuses why I'm not ready to get on the phone. And we want people just to start digging holes right now, right? So that's a good analogy, Charlie.
I also think it's really important that someone fits in with your culture. So they could be the best salesperson. They could come from a long line of really doing great sales. But if that person doesn't fit into your culture, perhaps maybe toxic, doesn't fit with the other group, it's just never going to work. And I also look for someone who is really humble but confident. So someone who's not, and it was spoken about today, afraid to make mistakes. You only learn by those mistakes, but is confident enough to say that they learned from it and they're willing to go to that next step. So I think those two are really important as well.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions, but the answers will make them rapid fire, just so we can get as many questions as we can.
Over here.
Stand up.
I'll stand up. So I work in the fintech space. Similar space to yourself, and it's a company called Squirrel, spelled with a SQIRL, and we build financial products, and we have 3 of them, and one of them has a long sales cycle, and we've done okay with it, but one of the problems I'm seeing is that it is about 18 months long, and I want that to be shorter. My question is, do you guys have any tactics of how to do it?
So, I'll answer first, or I'll try and be as quick as possible.
Let's do it. Let's see if you can do it.
I'd actually start with trying to figure out where that deal is stalled the longest. So in my past, I used to do enterprise deals that were 7 figures. And you constantly try and figure out where your deals were getting stalled. So is it getting stalled because they don't necessarily understand the value of what you're selling, which might mean you're actually selling to the wrong people, and that's why your deals take too long to get done. Maybe it's getting stalled after you get buy-in because they have no idea how they're going to build the business case. So I'm constantly looking at that. It's because there's always something you can fine-tune with the sales cycle, and without having more data, it's really difficult to answer the question. But if you've broken down your stages, start with the stage that is the longest and try and figure out with the reps, why is it taking so long to advance it from this stage to the next? And believe it or not, your answer is right there. And by identifying that, you can potentially give them the tool or content or coaching that they need to potentially advance it. Example, I'm trying to be brief. Example, like when I started at Coconut, our average sales cycle was 150 days. In Q4 this year, our average sales cycle was 68 days. And so we recognized, and thanks to the help of my team, that deals were getting stalled because people were having trouble building a business case to justify why they were going to buy the solution. And so we ended up building an ROI calculator so our prospects, future customers, not prospects, could then quickly build a business case. And it was just by doing that, suddenly we're moving deals beyond that proposal stage through to verbal fairly quick. So I'd say look at look at where your deals are getting stuck first and foremost, and then try and uncover why they're getting stuck there. Because it's not everywhere. It's probably one particular part of the sale where they're getting stuck.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll move to the next question. Just want to make sure that I have one last question.
Yeah, hi. My question is related to product market fit. I'm just curious to get each of your or either of your perspectives. Do you have a specific method or process in place whereby you channelize and assimilate and channelize that feedback back to product teams? And second related question is, in your opinion, do you think sales drive products, or does products drive sales?
It's a great March topic. We'll see everyone in 2 months. Okay, Charlie,
Thanks.
end it off for us quickly based on your obviously experience now at #paid.
Yeah, there's a great book you can read that actually Kenny got me on, which is called The Mom Test. I'd highly recommend you read that book. And because when I was at my startup, we sold $500K worth of software, but we'd never found product market fit. So I learned a lot about the hardships of what product market fit actually means. And so I focused a lot of my energies on just asking the right questions to people. And what I mean by that is typically when you're hunting for product market fit, you lean towards, is this a product that you would want to use? Is this a product that you think would add value to your life? Would you pay for this product? Those are questions you think you would ask. But inherently, you're just going to get a lot of false positives in that approach. And so you need to talk to people about their past. Just talk to them about what they've done in the past. How do they do things currently today? Why are they doing it that way? One of the questions I've learned from this book, honestly, that I think is incredibly valuable is when you ask someone about a problem that they're facing right now, and then you ask them, what have you done to fix that problem? And they say, well, I haven't really fixed it yet. It's not really a problem. And so I use it in discovery and sales all the time now when someone's like, yeah, this is I really want to do influencer marketing because I think it's going to solve all our marketing needs. And I'm like, great, how are you doing it now? And they're like, well, we haven't really do it to be something cool we're thinking about doing. I'm like, well, it's not really a problem for you guys. I don't think, right? So they're probably not going to pay money for that. So I think how you explore someone's past and explore someone's workflow, and if you start to hear things like they've used Excel to try to fix it, or they've had to patch together this process, or they hired this other company to do one thing and then hired another company, then you're starting to hone in on real problems that people would pay for. So I think that is a big piece. And so when I'm talking to a lot of our customers today about the way they do influencer marketing, and really trying to understand their problem, not right now all I'm doing is selling problems. We are on a mission to fix this problem. I think over the last 6 months, we've figured out what the big problem is in influencer marketing. It's trust, and no one trusts this whole ecosystem. I'm not selling any solution for that right now. But if I can articulate that problem really well, they'll probably want to keep going with me on this journey. And so if you just keep focusing on that big problem, the solutions will start to form.
Thank you. And I'll send you a PDF version of the Mom Test. Just shoot me a message so you don't have to pay for it. Great. I want a round of applause for all the panelists here today.